Is it going to be a little bit of a brain drain in Philadelphia, right? Offensive coordinator Shane Steichen goes to Indianapolis. Defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon goes to Arizona.
I do think the brain drain stuff is real. The LA Rams under Sean McVay, every year it feels like they have to, they have to make a new move.
I would point to Buffalo and say, well, they lost Brian Dable, and that was a huge loss for the Buffalo offense.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Hey, let's talk about the results of the Super Bowl here. I don't want to get into was it a holding? Who cares at this point? Congratulations to Kansas City. I thought they did a great job. Actually, to be honest with you, I thought they actually did a great job offensively all game. It's just that they couldn't possess the ball in the first half. In the second half, they started to possess the ball a little bit and just did what they did in the first half, which was score the ball, which was fine. But in the aftermath here, Philadelphia loses the game, and then not only that, then they lose both of their coordinators. Not just one, but both, Matt. Is it going to be a little bit of a brain drain in Philadelphia, right? Offensive coordinator Shane Steichen goes to Indianapolis. Defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon goes to Arizona. Both head coaches in their respective spots here. But a lot of times, and New England's the prime example of it doesn't matter if the coordinators leave. As long as they've got Bill Belichick in the building, there's no brain drain whatsoever. Actually, it's funny, right? Once they brought Matt Patricia back in, you could actually say they ended up doing worse from the coordinator position, bringing someone back in to the building. But no, generally for a team like New England, it doesn't matter what happens to their coordinators. But I would point to Buffalo and say, well, they lost Brian Dable, and that was a huge loss for the Buffalo offense overall. I don't know what to make of this quote unquote brain drain in Philadelphia. Maybe you could walk me through it.
Yeah, well, first of all, this is just the price of winning, right? The price of showing that you're a well-built operation, the price of going to the Super Bowl. Pretty incredible that, a team like the Bengals has gone to a Super Bowl. They've shown consistent success, and they've actually not had their coaching staff completely purged, especially because Lou Anarumo is a great defensive coordinator.
Exactly.
And it's always tough to say with a guy like Jonathan Gannon, who's coming off his defense not particularly showing too well at the end of the game. There's certainly, different times over his course of being the Eagles defensive coordinator that he's shown, maybe I would say his defenses are a little too passive. I would say that they're, they sit back a little bit too much. They kind of let offenses dictate the action to them a little bit more than I'd like as a defensive coordinator. But, maybe he still ends up being a great coach for the Arizona Cardinals. Just because you're a great or a bad coordinator doesn't mean you're necessarily you can translate that to exactly how you're going to be as a head coach. I do think the brain drain stuff is real. Look at that doesn't mean that the Eagles are suddenly going to fall off the face of the earth. In fact, I don't think they're going to fall off the face of the earth. But you look at a team like the LA Rams under Sean McVay, every year it feels like they have to, make a new move at their offensive coordinator position, especially. I mean, the 49ers are now in that spot where they're consistently every year getting rated. Right. So it's a good sign. It's also, it's going to say a lot about Nick Sirianni, who I think is a great head coach. And I think this is why a lot of teams prefer to build from the offensive side, not just because offense is more stable year over year than defense, but if you have an offensive minded head coach, and I've on this show praised Sirianni for passing off the play calling duties to Shane Steichen. But if for whatever reason Sirianni wants to take him back next year, he's capable of doing that, right? Or if you mentioned Brian Dable with the New York Giants, if they had lost Mike Kafka this coaching cycle, Brian Dable can just take back the play calling duties. But also, really with this, it's going to be a sort of a legacy building moment for Nick Sirianni, because the Rams have been fine because they have Sean McVay, obviously last year, notwithstanding with all the injuries and offensive line stuff. But you're right. If you have the guy there, like a Bill Belichick, or the Sean McVay or a Kyle Shanahan, you can continue to sustain and create and build that culture while you have this brain drain. But it absolutely is a real thing, especially to lose both coordinators at once. That really sucks.
All right, so Shane Steichen, just 37 years old. I mean, it's funny. Yes, he's young, but not only that, he's also still new to coaching. He's only been a year. He was a OC for the Chargers for a year and a half, and then a 1-year OC for Philadelphia. That's it. 2.5 years as an OC. At 37 years old, he's going to go to Indianapolis as their head man. And then Jonathan Gannon, he's 40 years old, so still relatively young pup here, but was an NFL scout for a few years. He was a DB coach under Frank Reich for 3 years in Indianapolis, and now 2 years as a defensive coordinator in Philadelphia. So he does have a little bit more experience, especially in the NFL life cycle, than Shane Steichen.
There's so much connective tissue now between the Eagles and the Colts, right? Like
Right,
the Colts
yeah.
hire Eagles offensive coordinator Frank Reich to be their head coach. Then the Eagles hire Colts offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni to be their head coach.
Right,
And then the Colts
right.
hire Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen to be their head coach. I mean,
Right,
that's it. It is pretty funny just the interconnected. And even Jonathan Gannon was a guy who had experience on Frank Reich's staff, as you mentioned. I actually really like Shane Steichen. I think was one of my favorite candidates this cycle, because I think it's what he's done is shown a lot of flexibility as a play designer. And of course, again, Nick Sirianni deserves a lot of credit for this too. But the fact that Steichen's been the play caller for at least a year and a half, I think is a big feather in his cap, especially because these offenses with the Eagles the last 2 years don't look anything like what Shane Steichen has come from. You know, you mentioned his history has mostly been with the Chargers. I mean, 2014, 2015, offensive quality control coach for the San Diego Chargers, San Diego, Los Angeles Chargers, 2016 to 2019. You know, he was with the Chargers as a defensive assistant actually in 2011, 2012. 2013, he was with, like offensive quality control coach for the Cleveland Browns. His background is mostly in that like Norv Turner style of offense.
In Arizona, Jonathan Gannon goes there. And again, you talked about it probably being more important for an offensive guy being a head coach, and yet we've got a defensive guy being the head coach in Arizona, when I feel as if this team's not really built that way. I mean, we kind of sort of make fun of Kingsbury and his offense and all of those things, but boy, I tell you what, they loaded up on the offensive side, and I think the defensive side needs a little bit of work. What did you think about Gannon going to Arizona?
It's never good when it feels like every Eagles fan I know, or every Eagles fan like I follow on Twitter, every Eagles like fan writer or whatever is like excited to see Jonathan Gannon go. That's not never. That doesn't really feel like a good sign.
Yeah,
but again, Jonathan Gannon has gotten a lot of head coaching interest pretty much since he became the Eagles defensive coordinator. So, I don't know Jonathan Gannon at all. I don't really know anybody that knows Jonathan Gannon. So I'm not like sure what his qualities are as like a leader or any of that stuff. And maybe that's really where he's just about to shine. I truly don't know. But I mean, frankly, the Cardinals are just such a weird team, right? They're in such a weird spot where they're financially and tied to Kyler, but Kyler's not gonna play for the first half of the season, you'd think, next year, because of how late his injury happened. I think Kyler's development, whereas we're talking about a guy like Jalen Hurts, who all Jalen Hurts ever does is get better from every single step, like from Alabama to Oklahoma to rookie year to second year to then third year, his team's in a damn Super Bowl. He just gets better. And again, I think some of that is credit to the Eagles coaching staff. I think a lot of it is credit to Jalen Hurts, but that's just not happened for whatever reason with Kyler. He's leveled off. There's always been the injuries, but they are financially tied to him. And then like you look at the rest of the roster, there's a lot of veterans, a lot of veterans on offense. Zach Ertz is there. DeAndre Hopkins might be on the trade block this year, but Marquise Brown, you think they'd want to get an extension done. They did a pretty big deal for James Conner last offseason. And then, defensively, they lose JJ Watt. They don't have like necessarily 5 premier players or anything like that. So they just, I don't know about the Gannon thing, because I just don't know where the Arizona Cardinals are going to be. Like, how are we going to be talking about the Arizona Cardinals this time, like next year? I have no idea.
I think they're going to be a dumpster fire, dude.
Yeah, they very well could be.
I think they're going to be an absolute dumpster fire.